Hi, I'm KIQI, and if you've ever been curious about how to use the Model 1 Play Differently mixer, then you clicked on the right video. I've had this mixer for about 3 years now, and I've slowly been figuring out how to use it. So I'm just going to show you a couple of mixing techniques that I use and a little bit about my setup, so that you can do the same. So if you are thinking of buying one of these mixers, or if you've ever come across one in your DJ gigs and you want to learn how to actually use it, then you can take some of these tips. Now, of course, there are infinite ways to play with this mixer, and I don't know all of them. Maybe Richie Houghton does, but I have learned a couple of techniques that have kind of become my go-tos, and so I'll share those with you today. I'm not going to do a full overview and walkthrough of everything on the mixer because there's already a lot of videos about that. But yeah, let's get started. So just the basics that you need to know. I have the Model 1. There's also a 1.4 that has 4 channels, but my mixer has 6 channels. So normal. What's not normal is everything else. So this is an analog mixer, not digital. So you can't just plug in a laptop or anything. You need to have a sound card if you're going to be using Tractor or something to mix on this. Of course, you can use this mixer with anything. You can use it with CDJs, you can use it with turntables, but for the purposes of this video, I'm going to be playing on Tractor. Because it's analog, there are no effects. So the Pioneer effects that you might be used to, there's none of that here. If you're familiar with the Allen & Heath zone mixers, it's a bit similar in that sense where they don't have effects on the mixer, but it's different in that this one's completely analog, whereas the Zone 96 has a sound card built in. The other big difference between this mixer and other mixers is the EQ. So on most mixers, you'll have a 3 or a 4 band EQ where you can cut the lows, the mids, and the highs, and sometimes the low mids and the high mids and the highs if you're on a zone mixer. But this has filters. So this row, well, we have the Q buttons, we know what those do. Then we have the filter buttons. So it's like any other mixer where if you, like the V10, if you wanted to use the filter on the individual channels, you would turn on the filter button, or you would turn on the master filter to use it for all of the channels. So this has also a master filter, but it also has a low pass filter as well as a high pass filter. So on the bottom row, we have the high pass filters. On the middle row, we have the ability to cut frequencies, either low, mids, or high frequencies. So that's kind of similar to the idea of mixing with EQs. And you can select which frequency to cut or boost with the sculpt, which is right above that. We have from 70 hertz up to 7,000 hertz. So if you want to find a really high hi-hat, you can find it there. If you want to just, work with the low end, you can keep it there. And then on top, we have the low pass filter. They call this the contour. So you're contouring the sound with the high pass filter and the low pass filter to get the sound that you want. Up at the top, we have the trim, which is you would find on any mixer. And then something that's cool about this mixer is you have the EQ for your master EQ. You also have booth levels. I don't have a booth, I just have monitors. And then you have 2 Qs, so you can have an A and a B Q. And you have your regular Q or mix or in the middle. I like to keep it in the middle. Yeah, I think that covers the basics before we actually start mixing. We won't really get into send and returns here, although can cover that in another video. So one thing, I'll teach you 2 strategies in this video. So the first strategy is mixing with the low end, and the second strategy is mixing with the mids. So let's take a loop. This is how it sounds just without anything done. No sculpting, nothing like that. If you want to turn the high pass filter on, very useful. Low pass filter. And you can actually turn off the sound completely by cutting both. Where did it go? Now let's say you want to boost something. Let's say we want to boost the bass. You can start to hear it clipping. There we have it cut. So just using the low end, let's bring in another track. And what I would do is, let's say if I just have this track playing normally, you can cut the low end as much as you want of the second track and then bring that one in. Another thing I like to do, depending on the elements of the track, is also use a bit of the high pass or low pass filter, depending on what you want to cut out. But this can be a nice way to bring a track in. That's kind of like if you were to cut the bass on a Pioneer mixer and bring a track in with like the mids and the highs cut a little bit. It would kind of be like that. So now you can kind of hear the other track coming through. If I didn't cut any of this, it would sound like this. As you can hear, there's too much bass. Sometimes I have it kind of in the middle, sometimes I have it down there. And then when you're mixing in a track, the master filter is helpful. Now I just switched to the other track. I wouldn't normally do it that fast, but let's do it again. That's one easy way to switch between tracks. So I like to use the low and high pass filter to just cut a bit more of the frequencies, because sometimes it sounds too harsh when you're bringing in the next track. You can also kind of like leave the volume a bit lower, but this volume fader is not so sensitive down here. Like you don't have much range in it, let's put it that way. Now in this setup that I have loaded right now, I only have 2 tracks. The rest is Ableton. So if I'm not playing with Ableton, then I'll have usually 4 tracks here and then maybe like something else, maybe RMX or something. So that's fun to play with 4 loops, because that's really where the magic of this mixer comes alive, because you could have, 1 track coming in with like the lows cut, all the way low cut. You can have 1 track coming in where you like the vocal and you want to boost that. So you would find the vocal as you're listening to it, and then you can boost it. So we'll hear what this sounds like. There's no vocal here, but we'll hear what it sounds like to boost different frequencies. And then, maybe you like a top loop or something that's coming from your fourth track, and then you have the highs boosted a little bit. And likewise, you can cut those as well. So it's either you're adding or you're editing, adding or taking away. And then these filters can be also really fun for using with effects and like doing tricks. This is just basics, but yeah, there's a lot more that you can do. So let's hear what that sounds like with changing the frequencies of 2 tracks. Here we are boosting the low end. Let's say we want to find something else. You can hear that the mids are boosted now. High mids. Highs. So the bass is not affected. The kick is not affected, just the highs. So maybe you want to bring in the next one with the low end. Now you can hear the kick really coming through. But likewise, we can have the kick on the first track and the highs from the second track. And you can cut the highs as well. I don't do that much, but maybe I should. Now I have the lows boosted on this track and the highs boosted on this track. You can also make your own breakdowns by cutting you can use the high pass filter or the low pass filter. So if you want to just make your own breakdown in the middle of a song, you can turn on the high pass filter. Then you can add like a delay or something. Make sure to turn off the delay when you bring it back in. The high pass filter sounds different if you turn it off and on versus if you cut it. It can feel stronger if you cut it. I like to do that. But Paco Osuna always does the button. Another way to mix that I like to do, especially if I'm using 3 or 4 tracks, is by keeping the groove of the song, keeping the low end in. So in that case, it would be really about cutting out the highs. So if you have one track playing, you're bringing in another track, you switch them over, and then you want to bring this track out, then you could start cutting the mids and taking away like more of the personality of the track as you're boosting the frequency of this one. I'm going to try to do it without getting copyright tagged, so that's why I'm just playing the first loop of each song, so it's not recognizable, but let's see if we can do that here. swapping the bass. Now you could start moving the frequency sculptor of the first track, as the other track is playing, to start taking out the mids, and you'll hear how it sounds different. You can hear how it starts to go to the background. Kind of like sitting in the back now. And then you can keep cutting it. You would have other stuff going on. You would have another track perhaps. You could have some effects and things. But you can hear how you can just, the song's disappearing. So that is another way to mix. So you've got cutting lows, you've got cutting highs. You could cut low to low and then cut the high. So cut the low of the track coming in, swap to the other track, and then start cutting the mids of the first track, or you could just cut the lows and keep it simple. So I hope this helps, and the next time you see a Model 1 mixer in a club and you want to use it, now you have a couple of tools in your bag. If you want to know more about my setup, I'll do another video about that here.